made the point earlier about insight being the output, and that to make really good use of all that data, you're going to end up prioritizing it against business goals and insight. And you also made the point, I think, about the talent.
Yeah.
So if you need high quality talent to be able to interpret that insight, and there's a shortage of that talent in the marketplace, does that become partially the role that technology can help out with? Something like AI, for example, where it takes some of that early decision making, the sort of the day-to-day activity around deeply analysing that data quickly, coming up with insights that are then addressed with the high priority work by the data analysts or data insight experts that you have.
And you're seeing, I mean, two trends in AI. One is kind of generic AI platforms where you can't just take it and do the work. You have to program it or train it or give it some initial, and then it goes off and learns. The other is more embedded AI into, that is specialized into certain tasks within, certain, domain areas. So, working on, in our world, creative intelligence and all that image matching and, or image tagging and things like that. So that gets you kind of started without having to sort of do all the programming. I think as well, I mean, coming back to the insights, the other, it's about getting the talent in. It's also, of course, I would say about, skilling up your existing organization. It's not about just buying in talent, but typically this is net new talent to our business. But also I think the other thing that's emerging now is kind of diversity in thinking. And if you hire a whole bunch of people who think the same way, you're going to get the same answer. So I'm really interested in this kind of cognitive diversity. We talk about diversity in our business, about how bringing in people from diverse backgrounds helps with the creative and innovation element of what we do. I think there's this cognitive thinking as well, because if you bring in a whole bunch of people trained in the same way, you're going to get to the same answer. So diversity in thinking as well, when you're bringing in talent, is important. So why aren't you bringing people who can spot different things from, I don't know, more of a creative background than necessarily a sort of analytical background? Because you get 10 people in a room, ask them to come up with 10 ideas. If they're from the same background group, same kind of directional thinking, you won't get 100. You get 10 ideas because it'll all come up with roughly the same idea.
But it's also important to build on what John's saying, to take that out of just the marketing function as well. You've talked about CX being the front line. We spend a lot of time with our CX operatives, with sales, with finance, who all have a different perspective on data and insight and interpretation of that. And that's kind of makes it kind of pretty interesting in terms of some of the conclusions that you come to. So machine learning, AI, is exciting, and it's going to be pretty huge over the next 10 years. I still think it's in its infancy for most companies. There are the players out there that do it really well, but most companies it's in its infancy. But it's also, to me, it's around the culture that you have within a company to experiment safely and fail fast, not where it's going to have a huge impact on revenue or customer satisfaction or those kind of things. But if you can create an environment where you are testing hypothesis and you're using, and as John said, the machine learning has to learn, right? You have to input for it to learn and then develop, etc. So I think for me it's around working cross-functionally and getting different sort of perspectives on that insight, and also encouraging a culture that allows you to fail and make mistakes and experiment and iterate. And if you're not doing that, you're never really going to learn and take it to the next step. So.
Prelini, you made the point earlier about data coming from multiple platforms, but some of the research I was reading online before this event suggested that websites are going to make a real resurgence over the next year, if not the next decade, because they're going to provide opportunity for organizations to gather that data into themselves through their own platforms, reuse that data on their own e-commerce platforms, and use that data to drive more personalized experiences. So in your experience, are you putting more effort towards buying data that's already ready for you to use from other agencies, or are you investing in your own technology to drive the income of that data?
So I'm going to split it up into two components, if that's okay. So are we buying data? No. So GDPR just really affects and changes the way you can do that. And many instances when you buy data, within a day or two of buying the data, it's irrelevant and it's out of date. So for us, we build our own data. And so we have researchers on board that actually build it. And it means that we're very targeted, and it's going back to that whole personalization of what we're looking for. It's not necessarily just on the personas that we're selling to, but it's what their pain points are, and you can build that data around it. The second part about the technology is we're investing massively in the technology. So we see e-commerce as a huge channel for us. And so the personalisation is taking place on the website. So when people are coming through, based on their usage and what they're searching for, we're using the technology itself to say, well, how do I personalise this website for them? They don't get the generic website. What is it that's served up in terms of the content that they see, the customer references that they see, the products that are actually targeted to them? And so as we go through personalisation, that is the key element, because you don't want it to be creepy, but you want something that's targeted rather than you having to go through 100 different areas to identify what it is you want. Well, here is 5 key pertinent content informations you need to be aware of. Based on what your behaviour has been, this is what technology will be great for you, and these are the references you can hear what other people are doing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe part of the answer here is, I think everyone has an emphasis on what does their website really need to be now, and how does it need to operate, and how does it need to work. But this idea that somehow all the data you need to collect is going to be through that is obviously not right. I mean, the truth is the availability of data extends to customers who are on social media, who are interacting with your competition, and are out, creating their own digital footprint in the world beyond what you might see through your own website. So I think, which kind of proliferates the problem of, what is the governance and process around which you're going to manage all of this potential data, and how are you going to use it? And then I think, clearly your own website and your e-commerce channels are key touch points for your customers, but so are all your other touch points, whether your contact center agents, whether they're sales, whether in your physical events. This is all, very highly valuable data. But in the end, it's back to the point you were making, is thinking through, well, how does that mean we show up as a company to the customer? Yeah. And do we show up as a company that the customer wants to do business with? Right from the very first interaction, which might not be anywhere near you and on your website, so maybe through what somebody has said about you in social media.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So how do you want to show up through the voice of other customers? I mean, these are the things you should be thinking about, and that actually, ironically, goes all the way back to, are you actually interesting? Do you create content? I mean, we're all guilty of creating way too much content.
Content is a problem.
Right. But so how do you? And nobody is interested at all in wasting any time.
We're very interested.
Well, nobody wants to spend time, waste time on things they don't want to look at, they don't want to read, right? So they want to consume quickly, go, actually that looks interesting to me, and move on. And so that's the challenge we're all trying to solve. Yeah. And I think that has an impact on how we design our websites and our experiences, and how we show up in all channels.